was 30 cycles old when I first heard the warning. At that age, 30 cycles feels like wisdom. You have studied long enough to believe you understand the universe, but you have not lived long enough to know how much you are wrong. The War Council chamber on Vorkon Prime was cold that morning. It was always cold. The elders liked it that way. They said the cold kept the mind sharp. I remember sitting at the long obsidian table, surrounded by the finest military minds in the Vorkai Empire, and feeling proud just to be in the room. At the far end of the table sat General Voss's Keth. He was old, older than any Vorkai officer still on active service. His carapace, which should have been deep amber like mine, had gone pale and brittle at the edges. His secondary eyes, the smaller pair above the main ones, had clouded over completely. He moved slowly. He spoke rarely. The younger officers called him a relic behind his back. They said High Command kept him around out of respect for his history, not because he had anything useful left to offer. I believed that then. The meeting was about expansion. The Vorkai Empire had been moving steadily eastward through the galaxy for 300 cycles, absorbing systems, building colonies, establishing trade routes. It was not conquest for the sake of conquest. It was simply what empires do. They grow, and when something sits in the path of that growth, it either joins or it moves aside. The species in the 12 Eastern systems had been catalogued roughly 40 years prior. They were called humans. They came from a single planet called Earth, a small wet world orbiting an average yellow star. Their civilization was young. Their technology was modest. Their government was a loose arrangement of previously competing nations that had only recently agreed to cooperate under a shared military structure called the Terran Compact. Commander Drelvas, sharp and ambitious and everything I wanted to be at the time, laid out the annexation plan with cool confidence. His holographic projections filled the center of the table with green light. 12 systems, 3 phases, projected completion within 2 campaign cycles, minimal resistance expected. He had barely finished his second sentence when the old general spoke. No. Just that. One word. Quiet enough that half the table had to ask him to repeat it. No, Vosketh said again, louder this time. He had not looked up from the table. His pale claws rested flat on the surface, perfectly still. Then he raised his head and looked at each of us in turn. When his clouded eyes reached mine, something moved through me that I could not explain. Not quite fear, something deeper. Something the body understands before the mind does. I will say this once, he said. I will not argue it, and I will not repeat it after today. But those of you with any sense will remember it for the rest of your lives. He paused. Do not fight humans. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then the laughter started. Not loud, not disrespectful. Just the quiet snickering of people who have already made up their minds and are only waiting for the meeting to confirm what they already believe. I laughed too. I am not proud of that, but I did. Drelvas thanked the general for his input and moved on to phase 2 of the projection. Voss's Keth said nothing more. He sat through the rest of the meeting with his claws flat on the table and his clouded eyes looking at something none of the rest of us could see. Later, in the corridor outside, we joked about it. We said the old general had been in too many wars. We said some soldiers reach a point where they see danger in everything, because danger is all they have ever known. We said it with the easy certainty of people who have never actually been in danger. None of us had ever fired a shot in real combat. We thought that made us rational. The annexation was approved within a week. I was assigned as senior tactical analyst aboard the flagship, a posting I had worked toward for 3 full cycles. The fleet that assembled at the eastern border was the largest the Empire had put together in 60 years. 212 vessels, ranging from heavy command ships to fast attack craft. Our weapons were superior. Our armor was superior. Our navigation systems, our communication arrays, our medical infrastructure, all of it was superior. The humans had 47 ships guarding the border station we were targeting. 47 against 212. I remember standing on the command deck as we came out of jump and looking at their formation on the tactical display, and I remember thinking that this was not going to be a battle. It was going to be a formality. The first exchange lasted 11 minutes. We destroyed the border station. We crippled or eliminated 19 of their 47 ships. The remaining 28 turned and ran, jumping out of the system so fast that our tracking systems barely caught their exit signatures. Everyone on the command deck cheered. I cheered too. What I did not understand, what none of us understood, was what those 28 ships were doing when they ran. They were not running from the fight. They were running toward something. They were sending a message. They were pulling a thread connected to every human being in the 12 systems and beyond, and that thread said, "They hit us, they hurt us, they are still here. Come now. Come all of you. Come with whatever you have." 3 hours after the border skirmish, our long-range sensors began picking up jump signatures. At first it was a handful, then a dozen. Then the display started updating faster than the crew could call out the numbers. Ships were appearing at the edge of the system from every direction, not just from the direction of the human core worlds, from everywhere, as if space itself was producing them. Our sensor operator, a steady veteran named Koss, read the profile data as it came in. His voice was calm at first, then it started to change. There were military vessels in the incoming group. Real warships, better armed than the 47 we had scattered. But there was also everything else. Cargo haulers with weapons welded to their hulls. Transport ships that had no business anywhere near a battle zone with missile racks bolted to their cargo bays. Mining platforms, slow and enormous, converted into floating artillery. Ships held together with patches and hope, running on fuel they had probably redirected from civilian use. Crewed by people who were not soldiers. They were not sending a fleet. They were sending themselves. All of them. The battle that followed is listed in official records as the Kessler engagement. I have read the official account many times. It is accurate in its numbers and completely wrong in every way that matters. The numbers say we lost 160 vessels. That is true. The numbers say the humans lost roughly 60% of their attacking force. That is also true. What the numbers do not say is what it felt like to watch it happen. We fight in formations. The Vorkai military has spent centuries developing tactical geometries that maximize coverage and minimize exposure. Every ship has a role. Every commander follows the pattern. It is efficient, proven, and it works against every other species we have ever engaged. The humans did not use formations. Their ships moved independently, each one making its own decisions, darting and turning and finding angles that our pattern prediction systems could not model, because there was no pattern to model. They did not coordinate the way we coordinate. They coordinated the way a storm coordinates, each part connected to the whole by something invisible and fast, moving together without moving the same. Our point defense systems are designed to track and eliminate incoming threats based on trajectory prediction. They are very good at this. They could not keep up with ships that seemed to change their minds mid-flight. And then there was the cargo hauler. I do not know its name. I do not know if it even had a formal military designation. It was a large, blocky freight vessel, the kind built for carrying goods between systems, not for combat. It had clearly been modified in a hurry. Its weapons were mismatched. Its armor was thin. Our point defense batteries hit it early in the engagement, multiple strikes. The ship lost hull integrity in 3 sections. It should have stopped. Any rational crew would have stopped. The math said stop. It kept coming. It accelerated. It flew directly into our secondary command vessel. There were still crew aboard when it hit. I stood on the deck and watched the explosion bloom on the tactical display, and I could not speak for almost 10 seconds. Not because of the damage, though the damage was significant, because of what it meant, because of what it told me about the kind of people we were fighting. Our communication team was intercepting their open channel transmissions throughout the battle. We had translation protocols. I could hear them. They were not calm. They were not professional in the way Vorkai officers are professional. That cool, managed quiet that we train for. They were furious. They were in pain. They were talking about people they knew. Crewmates from the 19 ships we had destroyed in the first exchange. Friends. Family members who had been stationed at the border. They were saying names, actual personal names, over and over. And those names were mixed in with their combat calls and their status reports, and their warnings to each other. They were not fighting because the math said they could win. They were fighting because we had taken something from them, and they intended to take it back. And if they could not take it back, they intended to make sure we remembered the cost. You cannot build a tactical model around that. There is no algorithm for a species that experiences loss as fuel. We lost 160 ships. The survivors scattered across 6 emergency jump corridors. I spent 11 hours in a damaged vessel with failing secondary life support, breathing stale air and watching the battle replay on my screen, looking for the moment where our strategy failed. Our strategy did not fail. It was sound. It was correct. Against any other opponent it would have worked. The humans had simply refused to be the opponent we had planned for. I filed my after-action report when we returned to Vorkan Prime. I kept the language measured and precise, the way a good analyst should. I described the tactical anomalies. I recommended revised modeling. I submitted it, and then I sat in my quarters for a long time thinking about a bulk freighter and the names being spoken on open channels. 6 weeks after we returned, I submitted a formal request to speak with General Vosketh. He declined. I submitted again. He declined again. On the third submission, he sent back a single line: "Come on the fourth day of next week, mid-morning." His quarters were in the oldest section of the Imperial complex, the part of the building that no one had renovated because no one important enough to warrant renovation had lived there in a long time. The corridors were dim. The air smelled like old stone. He was sitting in a chair by the window when I entered, reading something printed on physical paper. No one uses paper anymore. He did not look up immediately. When he finally set the document down, he studied me for a moment without speaking. His clouded eyes moved across my face slowly, reading something there that I could not read myself. "You wanted to know," he said. "Yes," I said. "I wanted to know." He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat. Outside the window, the capital city moved through its afternoon routine, completely unaware of the conversation beginning in that quiet room. "I fought them once," he said. "It was before you were born. A border conflict, much like this one. Small, contained, not a priority for high command. We expected to resolve it in a single campaign cycle." He stopped. I waited. "It lasted 11 years, he said. I did not respond. I was doing the math without meaning to. 11 years. The Vorkai equivalent of an entire generation of military service. Every year, he continued, our analysts told us we were close. Every year the numbers said we had more ships, more weapons, more resources, more strategic depth. Every year, on paper, we were winning." He paused again, longer this time. "They have a word. I learned it eventually, from captured communications. The word is despite. They do things despite. Despite the losses, despite the odds, despite every rational signal that says the correct action is to stop." He picked up his paper document and held it without reading it. "Other species break," he said. "Not because they are weak, because they are rational. When the evidence says the fight is lost, a rational mind accepts that and shifts its energy towards surviving or rebuilding. That is the correct response. We do it. Every species we have ever encountered does it." He looked at me. "Humans do not." The room was very quiet. "The worse the situation becomes," he said, "the more completely they commit to it." I watched a human commander, during the 6th year of that conflict, receive news that 2 of his 3 support fleets had been destroyed. He had 1 fleet remaining. He was outnumbered 4-1. Every calculation said retreat. He shook his head slowly. He ordered an advance. And the remarkable thing, the thing that I have never been able to fully explain in 40 years of thinking about it, is that his crew followed him, without hesitation. They were scared. I could hear it in their transmissions, but they advanced anyway. He set the paper down again. We lost that engagement, and the next, and the 3 after that. It took me 4 more years to accept that I could not win that war, and another year to negotiate an exit that preserved enough of my fleet to matter. I came home with 1/3 of the ships I left with, and a lesson that High Command did not want to hear. "What was the lesson?" I asked, though I already half knew. "That there are some opponents you cannot defeat by being better than them," he said, "because they are not measuring the fight the same way you are. You are measuring ships and weapons and territory. They are measuring something else. Something that does not show up in any report I have ever read, and until you understand what that thing is, you will keep sending fleets into their space, and counting the wreckage on the way home." I sat with that for a while. Outside, the city hummed quietly in the afternoon light. "Why did you only say 1 sentence in the council meeting?" I asked. "Why just the warning? Why not tell them all of this?" He looked at me steadily. "I did," he said. 30 years ago, after the war. I told them everything. I wrote long reports. I gave detailed presentations. I requested meetings with High Command, and I sat in those meetings and I explained every piece of it, exactly as I have explained it to you just now." He paused. "They listened politely, and they thanked me, and they filed my reports, and they continued making plans." He looked out the window. "People do not truly hear a warning until they have already needed it. That is not unique to the Vorkai. I suspect it is true of every thinking species in this galaxy, including humans." He picked up his paper document again. I understood that the conversation was over. I thanked him and stood and walked to the door. When I reached it, I paused. "What were you reading?" I asked. "The paper document." He glanced down at it. "Human history," he said simply. "I have been reading it for 40 years. Every time I think I understand them, I find something new." He turned a page carefully. "They are remarkable. Completely unreasonable and entirely remarkable." I left his quarters and walked back through the dim corridors of the old building and out into the afternoon light of the capital. I walked for a long time without going anywhere specific. I thought about the 47 ships that had become everything the humans could find, everything they could carry, everything they could bolt a weapon onto and launch into a fight they had every reason to believe they would lose. I thought about the freighter and the names on the open channels and the commander who ordered in advance with 1 fleet against 4. And I thought about how we had looked at their young civilization and seen something small and manageable and easy, and how they had looked at our 212 ships and apparently seen something different entirely. Something that made them angry enough to answer. I went back to my office and I wrote an addendum to my after-action report. I did not know if anyone would read it. I did not know if it would make any difference. But Vossisketh had spent 40 years trying to pass a truth forward, and I felt I owed him at least one attempt to do the same. I wrote that humans are not powerful because of their ships or their numbers or their technology. All of those things are real, but none of them are the reason. The reason is something harder to measure and harder to counter. The reason is that somewhere in their history, as a species, they appear to have made a decision, not formally, not in any document or treaty, but in the way that whole civilizations sometimes quietly decide things together, that they were never going to be the ones who stopped first. That the correct response to impossible odds was not to calculate a retreat but to find a way to make the odds less impossible. That a reason to give up was, to them, simply a reason to want it more. I wrote that until we understood this, truly understood it as something lived and felt and not just recorded in a file, we would keep making the same mistake. I submitted the report and closed my screen and sat in the quiet of my office for a long time. Somewhere out in the eastern systems, in the 12 green-lit territories on the holographic map that Drelvas had swept his claw across so confidently, humans were burying their people. They were repairing their ships. They were reading the names of the ones they had lost. And they were watching the border. I did not need a general or a report or 40 years of history to know what would happen if we crossed it again. Vossisketh was right. He had always been right. Never fight humans. Not because you cannot hurt them. You can. We did. But hurting them is the last thing you want to do. Because the thing that wakes up on the other side of that pain is not a weakened opponent. It is something that has been given a reason. And a human with a reason is the most dangerous thing I have ever seen.